In the cold, sterile halls of the United Earth Command, General Arya Holt stood before a massive digital map. A deep furrow creased her brow as she scanned the red blotches that marked enemy territory, every one a reminder of humanity's darkest hour. The Sien Dominion, a ruthless alien empire, had struck without warning. In less than a month, they'd shattered Earth's outer defenses and obliterated colonies on the farthest reaches of human space. But that wasn't the worst of it. Arya's fingers hovered over the console as she reflected on the most devastating blow, the brutal capture of the Luna outpost, humanity's final stronghold on the moon. Once a symbol of humanity's dominance in space, it had become a living nightmare. The Sien had taken prisoners, executed key personnel, and looted every piece of technology they could find. "They've been silent for too long," Arya muttered to herself. "What are they waiting for?" "General Holt," came a voice from behind her, breaking her concentration. Colonel Marcus Callahan, her second-in-command, stood with a tablet in hand, his face grim. "We've just received a transmission from the Resistance on Luna. They've given us a location. The prisoners are still alive." Arya's pulse quickened. This was the first real lead they'd gotten since the fall of Luna. Her eyes flicked to the screen, then back to Callahan. "Get the fleet ready. We're going in." The fleet, a ragtag collection of military ships and civilian transports, formed up above Earth's orbit. Arya stood at the command center of the Talon, a sleek warship that had been retrofitted with every scrap of technology humanity could salvage. Her mind raced as the crew prepared for what could be a suicide mission. If they were too late, Luna would fall, and the hope of reclaiming any piece of humanity's former glory would vanish forever. "General, we're clear to launch," came the voice of Lieutenant Avery, the comms officer. Arya nodded, turning to the large viewport that overlooked the growing fleet of ships. A somber silence filled the bridge. Every officer, every soldier, knew that this mission was more than just a rescue operation. It was humanity's last chance to strike back. "Commence launch," Arya ordered. The ships shot out from the orbital platform, heading for Luna at breakneck speed. As they crossed into deep space, the tension became palpable. The Sien were not known for their mercy, and the thought of their cold, calculating tactics sent chills down Arya's spine. Yet, she couldn't afford to let fear cloud her judgment. She couldn't afford to lose. Hours later, the moon loomed large in the distance. The battered remains of Luna's outpost could be seen from orbit, twisted wreckage suspended in the empty black. The enemy fleet had seemingly disappeared, leaving only silence in its wake. "Sir," Avery's voice came over the comms again, this time with an edge of uncertainty. "No enemy vessels detected. It's like they've vanished." "Not vanished," Arya muttered. "Bait." The realization hit like a hammer. The Sien weren't gone, they were waiting. The silence was a trap. Arya's heart raced, but she kept her composure. It wasn't just the Talon and the rest of the fleet at risk. If the Resistance was to survive, they needed to strike hard and fast, now. They had no room for hesitation. "We've got one shot at this," Arya said, her voice commanding the bridge. "Prepare boarding teams. We go in, rescue our people, and get out." She knew that the odds were slim. But the choice was clear. If they didn't act, humanity would lose everything. There was no retreat, no second chance. The ships descended toward the surface, weaving through the wreckage, as they landed on the darkened plains of Luna. The Resistance's signal was faint but identifiable. Arya, wearing her combat exosuit, led the first group of soldiers out of the ship, her eyes scanning the eerie horizon. "Keep your heads down," she ordered, her voice low and steady. They advanced through the shadows, the faint sound of distant explosions echoing in the air. The Sien were still out there, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Every step felt like a countdown to catastrophe. As they neared the abandoned hangar where the Resistance signal originated, a sharp, metallic hiss sliced through the stillness. A series of laser beams streaked across the dark expanse. A volley of shots hit the nearby structures, sending debris scattering into the void. "It's a trap," one of the soldiers shouted. But it was too late. The first wave of Sien soldiers emerged from hidden positions, their sleek, dark armor reflecting the pale light of the moon's surface. With cold precision, they opened fire, forcing Arya and her team to take cover. The war had only just begun. Arya's heart raced as she crouched behind a twisted mass of lunar debris, the metallic clang of Sien gunfire ringing in her ears. Her soldiers, battle-hardened but not invulnerable, fired back in quick, precise bursts. The moon's silence seemed to amplify the chaos, each shot more deafening than the last. The Sien weren't here to negotiate, they were here to annihilate. "General, we're pinned down," shouted Lieutenant Cal, his voice strained over the comms. He was one of her best, but the sheer numbers of the enemy were overwhelming. It was clear that the Sien weren't just waiting for them. They had been lying in wait for days, maybe even weeks, anticipating this exact moment. The trap had been set, and humanity had walked right into it. "Fall back," Arya barked, her eyes scanning the battlefield. She couldn't let her team get slaughtered. "Regroup at the hangar, now." As the soldiers pulled back to the shelter of the nearby hangar, the Sien advanced relentlessly. Arya was the last to retreat, firing her plasma rifle in one hand while gesturing for the others to fall back. The alien forces were already closing in, their sleek combat suits glowing faintly under the light of distant stars. The door to the hangar slammed shut behind them, and the team immediately took cover inside. The massive, abandoned structure had once been a storage facility, but now it was a battlefield. The air was thick with a smell of burnt ozone, and the floor was littered with the remnants of earlier skirmishes. The resistance fighters they had come to save were nowhere to be seen, but the faint beeping of a distress beacon confirmed they were close. Arya took a deep breath and tapped her comm. "Avery, get us an update. Any sign of the resistance?" The comms officer's voice crackled through, filled with static. "Negative, General. We're picking up multiple encrypted signals, but we can't pinpoint their exact location yet. We need to move fast. Sien reinforcements are incoming." She turned to Callahan, her expression hardening. "We're not leaving without them. Prepare the evac shuttles. We'll need to move them out before reinforcements arrive." Callahan nodded, his face grim. "Understood, ma'am." The team moved deeper into the hangar, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. Every shadow could hide a threat, and Arya's eyes darted from corner to corner, assessing every potential danger. The resistance fighters had been here recently. There were signs of hurried movement, abandoned equipment, and hastily scribbled messages on the walls. But there was no sign of life. "Where the hell are they?" Arya muttered, frustration mounting in her chest. Suddenly, a voice crackled through her earpiece. "General Holt," said a gruff, familiar voice. It was Commander Elias Cruz, leader of the Lunar Resistance. "We're inside the lower levels. The Sien don't know we're here yet, but we're running out of time. We need you to come down, now." Arya's pulse quickened. "We're on our way, Cruz. Stay put and keep your people alive." She motioned for her team to follow as she moved toward a hidden door at the back of the hangar. The Resistance's signal had come from below, and this was their only chance to link up before the Sien broke through. As the door slid open, they descended into the catacombs beneath Luna's surface, the dim glow of emergency lights illuminating their path. The air was colder here, damp with the hum of underground machinery. The deeper they went, the more Arya could feel the tension building in her chest. They had to hurry. "How many people are down here, Cruz?" Arya asked, her voice low. "Enough to make a difference," Cruz replied. "But we've been pinned down for days. We don't have much left in the tank. Your fleet needs to get here soon." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed behind them. Arya's heart skipped a beat as she spun around, her rifle raised. Her soldiers tensed, but it wasn't Sien's soldiers that emerged from the shadows. A group of ragged humans stumbled into view, their faces gaunt from days of hiding. They wore patched-up armor and carried a variety of makeshift weapons. Some were barely conscious, others clutching their wounds, as if they could stem the bleeding themselves. But it was their eyes that caught Arya's attention. These were the survivors, the ones who had seen the worst of the Sien invasion and lived to tell the tale. "General Holt," Cruz said, his voice solemn, "we've lost too many already. We need to take the fight to them. Arya nodded, her jaw clenched. This was no longer just a mission to rescue the lost. It was a call to arms. We'll make them pay, she vowed. The corridors of Luna's underground resistance base hummed with activity as General Arya Holt and her team of soldiers prepared for their next move. The survivors from the resistance had rallied around their new hope, the Talon, the last remaining warship with the power to strike back at the Cien invaders. The once desolate, abandoned facility was now a makeshift command center, filled with makeshift technology and crammed with fighters preparing for their next assault. Arya stood near the front of the room, scanning the newly updated tactical maps projected on the walls. The battle for Luna was still ongoing above, but the Cien were starting to consolidate their hold on key positions. Arya knew the resistance needed something more than a few daring skirmishes if they were going to take the fight to the enemy. General Holt, Cruz said, stepping up beside her, his face smeared with dirt and exhaustion. We've lost contact with several of our forward outposts on the surface. The Cien are moving fast, and their technology is ahead of ours. We can't keep running forever. Arya's lips tightened as she listened. The situation was dire, but there was something in her gut telling her that they had one chance left, one final deadly strike. We won't be running, she said quietly. We're going to hit them where it hurts. She turned to Callahan, who was already preparing a tactical strike plan. Gather our best assault teams. I want us on the surface in the next hour. We're going to target their command nexus. Callahan raised an eyebrow, skeptical but resolute. You're talking about taking out their central operations. That's the heart of their fleet, General. It's a suicide mission. Arya met his gaze, her eyes cold with determination. I know, but the Cien didn't just invade us. They're trying to break our spirit. They want us to know we're defeated before we even fight back. And if we don't strike now, we'll never have another chance. Her voice was unwavering, and her men knew the weight of her words. The stakes were too high. There was no turning back. The surface of Luna had been transformed into a battlefield. The Resistance's hold on the outer regions had crumbled under the weight of the Cien's superior firepower. The Cien Command Nexus, an enormous, sleek structure, loomed in the distance, surrounded by defensive lines, automated turrets, and enemy forces. We move fast and hard, Arya said, rallying her troops before they exited the underground base. No hesitation. We take out the command center, and we bring the fight to them, no matter what. She led the charge, the sound of her soldiers' boots pounding against the lunar soil in a synchronized rhythm. Their breath echoed in their helmets, muffled by the eerie stillness of the moon. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for the future of humanity. The command center was an imposing structure, gleaming black metal that shimmered in the pale lunar light, with jagged, crystalline towers that resembled spires. The Cien forces guarding it were heavily armed, and their shields glowed a faint violet. Arya had expected a challenge. But even so, the Resistance's strategy was simple. Strike hard, hit fast, and pray they could get to the core before the Cien could retaliate. Cover the flanks. Arya shouted as the first wave of enemy soldiers began to converge on their position. The Cien moved with terrifying precision, their assault tactics well-oiled from years of conquest. But Arya and her team were prepared. Explosions ripped through the ground as Resistance fighters set off charges to breach the outer perimeter. The sky was lit with the brilliant bursts of plasma fire, and the ground trembled beneath the force of the battle. It wasn't just the Resistance fighting for their lives. It was humanity's last stand. General, we're in, shouted Cruz, who had led a separate assault team to breach the eastern wall. Arya's heart beat faster as she made her way toward the central spire. The final confrontation was imminent. They couldn't afford to lose focus now. A sharp explosion rocked the ground beneath her, sending her sprawling onto the cracked lunar soil. Her visor briefly flashed red with the impact of a stray blast, and her head swam with dizziness. She quickly regained her bearings, pulling herself back to her feet. We're under fire. Get to the core now. Arya barked. The command center's outer defenses were breaking down, but the Cien elite soldiers had begun their counterattack. She was almost there. The access point to the central control hub was within reach. But just as Arya took a step forward, a cold, metallic voice rang out from the dark recesses of the complex. "Do you think you can stop us, human?" Arya froze. The voice was smooth, chilling, and unmistakable. The Cien general, Zarak, the ruthless leader of the invasion, stepped forward. His tall frame cloaked in a cloak of shimmering dark energy. His eyes glowed a malevolent green as he surveyed the human forces. His smile cruel. "You are already defeated. This is merely the end of a long, inevitable process," Zarak continued, his voice tinged with disdain. Arya's fists clenched in fury. "You don't get to decide that." Without hesitation, she raised her plasma rifle and fired. The blast hit Zarak square in the chest, only to fizzle against a shimmering energy shield that pulsed with an eerie light. Zarak laughed, the sound reverberating through the complex. "Your weapons are primitive. Your resistance, pathetic. You fight against the inevitable." But Arya wasn't backing down. "Not now. Not ever." "You're wrong," she said, her voice steely. "We didn't start this war, but we will end it." With a signal to her team, the fight intensified, and the ground erupted into chaos as humanity's final push began. The battle raged around General Arya Holt as she squared off against Zarak, the cold and unyielding Cien general who had been the mastermind behind the invasion of Earth and its colonies. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning ozone, the constant hum of weapons fire, and the roar of combat reverberating across the lunar landscape. Zarak's shield absorbed her plasma blast with ease, its energy flickering like a sickly green pulse in the dim moonlight. He was an imposing figure, towering above her with an aura of untouchable arrogance. His form shimmered like dark glass, his movements calculated and deliberate. But Arya knew better than to let fear cloud her focus. This was humanity's fight for survival, and she would not let the Cien victory go unchallenged. "You're wasting your time, General," Zarak sneered, stepping closer, his voice laced with venom. "Humanity will break beneath the weight of the Cien Empire. The sooner you accept that, the less painful your death will be." Arya's teeth gritted together, and her eyes flashed with fire. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was personal. Her family, her people, her entire civilization had been torn apart by the Cien. She would not let their dominance go unopposed. "I'm not here to die, Zarak," Arya replied, her voice ice cold. "I'm here to end this war." She motioned to her soldiers, who had taken up defensive positions around the command center's perimeter. They were fighting tooth and nail against the Cien, but the alien forces were far from finished. Zarak's forces had massed in overwhelming numbers, each one more deadly than the last. Despite the Resistance's best efforts, they were beginning to lose ground. "Push forward," Arya shouted, rallying her team. "We can't stop now. We've come too far." With a battle cry, her soldiers surged forward, flanking Zarak's forces, cutting down Cien warriors with ruthless precision. But the alien general was still a formidable adversary. With a flick of his wrist, a torrent of energy erupted from his staff, striking Arya's soldiers with brutal force. The ground trembled beneath the blast, sending debris scattering in all directions. "Pathetic," Zarak muttered, his eyes narrowing as he turned back to Arya. "You are all nothing more than insects." But Arya was already moving. Her combat suit's enhanced agility allowed her to dart from cover to cover, narrowly avoiding Zarak's blasts. She couldn't afford to be distracted. Not now. Her objective had always been clear, to reach the command nexus and shut down the Cien systems. If she could cripple their command infrastructure, humanity would stand a chance. "Cover me," she ordered, sprinting toward the entrance to the heart of the command center. "I'm going in." With a burst of speed, she dodged through the chaos, her mind locked onto the entrance. Her soldiers laid down suppressive fire, doing everything they could to hold back Zarak's forces, but the sheer number of enemy combatants threatened to overwhelm them. It was a race against time. Arya reached the doors to the command center, her hand trembling slightly as she activated the entrance. The heavy metal doors groaned open, revealing the heart of the CN operation, a labyrinth of dark corridors lined with humming consoles, data terminals, and flashing monitors. Inside, a single figure waited. She wasn't alone. At the far end of the room stood a CN officer, a shadowy silhouette against the flashing lights. The officer's armor was sleek, polished, and distinctly different from the standard soldiers, an indication of their importance. The officer turned, their eyes glinting like a predator's. "You should not have come here, General Holt." Aria's eyes narrowed. She had no time for distractions. This was the CN's command center, their nerve center. She had to disable it before reinforcements arrived, or all would be lost. Without warning, the officer lunged forward, a flash of steel cutting through the air. Aria raised a rifle, but the officer was too fast, disarming her in a single fluid motion. She felt the cold touch of a blade at her throat. "Do you truly believe you can stop us?" the officer hissed, their voice deep and distorted. "You are nothing. Your fight is pointless." Aria's breath came in quick, steady gasps as she stared down the blade. She refused to show fear. This wasn't just a battle of weapons. It was a battle of wills. "You're wrong," she spat, her voice filled with defiance. "We didn't start this war, but we're going to end it." In one swift motion, Aria's combat suit activated, her arm snapping up to catch the officer's wrist, locking it in place. The force of her counterattack sent the officer sprawling back, their weapons skidding across the floor. The officer recovered quickly, but Aria was already moving, darting toward the central console. With a series of rapid keystrokes, she initiated the self-destruct sequence. The countdown began. "You can't," the officer began, but Aria was already focused on the task at hand. "I already have," Aria interrupted, her voice calm. "You're finished." The officer lunged again, but Aria was faster. She ducked beneath the strike, pivoted on her heel, and sent the officer crashing into a nearby terminal with a brutal kick. The console sparked violently as the countdown ticked away, the energy systems flickering as Aria turned to make her escape. The surface of Luna erupted as the command center began to collapse in on itself. The explosion sent shockwaves across the battlefield, obliterating the heart of the CN operation. The skies were alight with the fire of destruction, but the resistance had gained their first real victory in this war. The CN had been struck a mortal blow. But even as the debris fell around her, Aria knew this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and the CN had only begun to show their true strength. As the dust settled, Aria stood tall, her gaze fixed on the horizon. This was not a fight they could win in one battle, but they would win it. The lunar landscape was scorched and barren. As the smoke from the shattered CN command center billowed into the black void above, the skies seemed to pulse with the aftershocks of the explosion. Aria Holt stood amidst the chaos, the weight of the battle's toll pressing down on her shoulders. The war was far from over, but tonight humanity had tasted victory for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "General Holt," Cruz called out, approaching her from the wreckage. His face was smeared with dirt, and his uniform was torn from the battle, but there was a glint of pride in his eyes. "The command center's gone. We've taken out their main communications hub." Aria gave a curt nod, her gaze never wavering from the horizon where the remnants of the CN fleet loomed like an ominous storm cloud. "It's a good blow, Cruz," she said, her voice steady, "but it won't be enough to end this." Cruz's smile faltered. "You don't think they'll retreat?" "They've lost a strategic command center, but the CN don't retreat, not without a fight. They'll regroup, adapt, and come for us again, harder. We need to be ready." The sounds of their victory were drowned out by the hum of ships in orbit. The Resistance's fleet, made up of anything from converted freighters to hastily repaired warships, was assembling in the distance. But it was clear that their numbers were small compared to the might of the CN Empire. Even with their victory on Luna, Aria knew it would be a long, hard fight ahead. "General," Callahan's voice crackled through her comms, cutting into her thoughts. "We've got incoming. CN reinforcements are en route, larger fleet, more firepower." Aria's stomach twisted. "How long until they arrive?" "Less than 3 hours," Callahan responded. We've got no time to waste. We won't win this with tactics alone, Arya muttered, her eyes narrowing as she thought through their options. It's time to change the game. The Resistance's makeshift fleet, though ragtag and underprepared, gathered in a tight formation around the moon. Arya had called for an emergency strategy meeting, and the commanders of the scattered human forces had assembled aboard the Talon. The ship's dimly lit war room was filled with faces, some exhausted, others resolute. The weight of what was to come pressed heavily on everyone's shoulders. We've done the impossible before, Arya began, her gaze sweeping the room. And now we do it again. The Sien are coming, and they'll hit us with everything they have. But we know them. We know how they fight, how they think. They've overextended themselves. They believe they've won, and that's where we'll hit them hardest. Commander Cruz raised a brow. You're suggesting we go on the offensive? Exactly, Arya said, her voice sharp. We've lost too much already to sit back and wait for them to strike first. We hit them where they least expect it, before their reinforcements can reach us. We're going after their fleet. The room fell silent. It was a risky move, even by Resistance standards. The human fleet was small, battered, and outclassed by the Sien's superior warships. But there was no choice. Arya knew that this was humanity's best shot at turning the tide. We'll split the fleet into two groups, Arya continued. One will engage the Sien in a decoy battle to keep their attention. The other will slip through their lines and strike at their command ship, the heart of their fleet. If we can take it down, we can cripple their war effort. Lieutenant Avery, the Talon's comms officer, leaned forward, uncertainty in his voice. But what if they're waiting for that? What if they already know we're coming? Arya met his gaze. Then we'll make them pay for underestimating us. The plan was set in motion. The Resistance's two-pronged attack began just as the first waves of Sien ships entered Luna's orbit. The decoy fleet, led by Cruz, engaged the Sien's front line with everything they had. The battle was fierce, the human ships outgunned but determined to hold their ground. Plasma and laser beams collided in a brilliant but deadly dance across the empty space. Meanwhile, the real assault force, led by Arya aboard the Talon, used every trick in the book to evade detection. They skated around the edges of the Sien formation, exploiting the chaos caused by the decoy attack. Their path was treacherous, and every moment was filled with the tension of knowing the Sien could discover them at any time. We're almost there, Arya said as they neared the heart of the Sien fleet. Prepare for a direct assault. No hesitation. The Talon shuddered as a blast hit the outer hull, but they pushed forward, closing the distance to the massive Sien command ship, an imposing behemoth of alien design, bristling with weapons and shields. This was it. If they were going to win, they needed to disable the command ship and take out its bridge. All ships converge on the command vessel, Arya ordered. The fleet charged forward, the decoy forces keeping the Sien busy, while Arya's group prepared for the final push. The Talon was the first to break through the enemy lines, its weapons blaring as they closed in on the command ship. And then, the unexpected happened. General. Cruz's voice came through Arya's comms, panic clear in his tone. We've got a problem. Their reinforcements are here. The full might of the Sien fleet had arrived, and it was a wall of destruction. Hundreds of ships surrounded the human fleet in an instant, a vast armada designed to crush them in one fell swoop. Arya's heart skipped a beat as she saw the scale of the incoming assault. They were outgunned, outmanned, and vastly outclassed. But then she felt it, the spark of resolve that had fueled every human battle since the first shot was fired in this war. We don't retreat, Arya said, her voice hard as steel. We fight. For humanity. For everything we've lost. For every person we've left behind. With a roar, the human fleet surged forward, charging headfirst into the oncoming storm. The battle was a cacophony of fire and fury, as the Talon and the remaining human forces struck deep into the heart of the Sien fleet. Their ships, though outclassed, fought with an intensity and determination the Sien had never anticipated. Arya's plan had been risky, but it had worked, barely. They had struck at the core of the Sien command structure, And now it was up to them to finish what they had started. Aria's hands tightened around the controls as she piloted the Talon into the heart of the enemy flagship. The enemy's defenses were faltering, but the battle was far from over. In her mind's eye, she saw the faces of the people she had lost. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. The Talon rammed straight into the Sien command vessel, tearing through its outer hull. The explosion shook the battlefield as Aria and her team made their final assault on the bridge. The Sien forces were in chaos, scrambling to respond, but it was too late. As Aria's team breached the command center, Zarak appeared once again, his energy shield flickering, his eyes burning with fury. But this time he was alone. "You think this is over?" Zarak snarled, his voice trembling with rage. Aria stepped forward, her eyes locked on him. "No, but it's over for you." With a final, decisive strike, she ended the war.